Maybe let's just give our colleagues another minute. We'll then start. It is 12:33. Good afternoon, colleagues, distinguished guests, industry leaders, our partners. A warm welcome to all of you. My name is Sim Kuluse. I am the Technical and Policy Manager at SAPVIA. I will be your host for today. Maybe as a start, and let's start with some housekeeping. If you don't mind to mute yourself until you speak, if you can assist us with that, that would be highly appreciated. And if you have questions during the course of the webinar, please post them on the chat. We will pick them up from there. Otherwise, we are having a Q&A session at the end. Maybe for those of you who might not know who we are the South African Photovoltaic Industry Association, SAPVIA for short. We represent over 500 members, and our members come from the full value chain. So we are really the voice of solar PV industry in South Africa. This afternoon, we are gathered here really at an interesting juncture in South African renewable energy space. Solar PV technology as an industry has experienced significant growth in South Africa. As of last month, or towards the end of last month, the installed capacity in the country is sitting over 11 gigawatt hours, and which makes us the highest or number one solar installed capacity in Africa and top 20 in the world. And really this growth has been driven by private sector and public sector through the REAP program. And obviously it comes from the utility scale, commercial, and the residential market. And I must say, under the residential market, we see the uptake mainly from the middle class to affluent residents. So as we celebrate these commercial wins, we are confronted with a challenge of persistent people who are not connected or who are not electrified. Yes, as a country, we've achieved over 80% of electrification, but we know that about 1.6 million of households in South Africa do not have access to reliable, safe, and grid-connected electricity. And some of these household colleagues might not be connected in the near future or in the foreseeable future. And it's precisely at this point that we are gathered here in this virtual room and under the theme of off-grid, but we are on the map to unlock the universal access for all. And really to bridge this gap, we as SAPVIA, we are proud to launch the new engine room for the universal access, which is our universal access working group. And I look forward to the fruitful discussions, the partnership that we're going to form going forward, and that breakthroughs that we will have through this working group. So welcome once again, and thank you for joining us. And as supposed to kick us off, allow me to welcome Mr. Bongani Ntlabati, who is the Director of Integrated National Electrification Program, Technical Planning within the Department of Electricity and Energy. Mr. Ntlabati is responsible for development of the Integrated Electrification Plan and the implementation of the bulk infrastructure to achieve universal access by 2030. So he has his work cut out, and I think he's the best person to set the scene for us because he has the sight of what challenges we have as a country. Mr. Ntlabati, the floor is yours. Thank you, sir.
No, thank you very much for that introduction, and afternoon once again, colleagues. As introduced, my name is Bongani Ntlabati, Technical Planning Director within INEP, responsible for planning of electrification projects countrywide. But I must say in this meeting that as much as DE is responsible for addressing universal access countrywide, there are other departments that are doing the same as what DE is doing in addressing universal access. I mean, one of the key departments that does what we do is COGTA. We know that COGTA, through their massification, program, also electrify people countrywide, together with Human Settlement, together with the presidency. But we are, of course, the department that roll out these projects at large scales. And at some point, I know that our minister have indicated that whatever work is happening elsewhere outside the department needs to come back to the department, because when people talk about electrification, they only look to one department, and that department is the Department of Electricity and Energy. With that said, I'm not the one driving the presentation, so if Zimkita, you can move on to the next slide. The outline of the presentation is as in this page, where we are going to be looking at the departmental priorities, followed by the background and context. And then we are going to zoom into the current INEP model. And then obviously I will then take you through the repurposed INEP, which is going to be outlined in our action plan that we developed together with Sanedi, ESCOM, and other key stakeholders. And then we are going to look at the risks and mitigants, and then I will present the Modimbo case study, which is a microgrid that was done by ESCOM in Limpopo, electrifying over 470 people. And then we'll obviously then go into the conclusions. If we can move into the next slide. So obviously our priorities as a department are known by everyone, but the one that we are looking at today is the very first one, which is the universal access to energy. Obviously, there are other, priorities that the department is focusing on. The one that is key to us as a department is to drive industrialization and lead innovations. to also transform the energy demographics and asset South Africa continental and global energy leadership. If we can move into the next slide. Next slide, please. So I won't go slide by slide, but I mean, everyone knows what INEP is about. Our mandate, as earlier said, is to, address universal access through energy. We get our money from National Treasury, and the funds are gazetted through dollar on two schedules, which is Schedule 5B and Schedule 6B. Schedule 5B being the municipalities, and Schedule 6B being ESCOM. And we also have another grant that we get from Treasurer for non-grid electrification. We obviously then disperse the funds to our agencies who are ESCOM and municipalities, and our non-grid service providers are appointed by the department, and they are allocated projects based on the applications that the department will have received from the municipalities. And obviously, as and when they execute the connections, and after due diligence has been conducted by the department, those service providers are duly paid for the work that they would have conducted within those municipalities. So our backlog at the moment, as per the stats, of I think 2022, we're sitting at about 1.6 million people without access to energy. And if you include the illegal connections, the 1.6 million quickly goes to about 3 million households that are without access to energy. And our aim as a department is to achieve that, by 2030. But if you look at our electrification rates, at the moment, it suggests that it will take us another 15, 16 years to address the universal access. Hence, the repurposing of INEP, is key for the department in ensuring that come 2030, the universal access of about 3 million households without proper access to energy is addressed. I think I've covered most of the slide, but maybe just to still carry on with the background. To date, we have connected over 8.4 million people to energy between, I think, 1996 and the end of 2024-25. The money that has been spent by government in electrifying people is just over 110 billion. Obviously, our access is sitting at just under 95%, with just over 5.3% households without access to energy. And our aim is to then address that by the end of 2030. We obviously have a number of municipalities participating in the program countrywide, including ESCOM and our non-grid service providers. If we can move to the next slide, please. So as I earlier indicated that, INEP is responsible for planning, administration, monitoring and evaluation, and obviously reporting to treasurer the connections that are achieved on an annual basis. And we obviously also do technical audits and coordination of the, executed projects, which are your households, together with the bulk infrastructure projects that are responsible for giving us the connections that we need to achieve as a department. So in most cases, when we go into project areas, you'll find that we can't achieve connections without erecting bulk infrastructure. Some of the bulk infrastructure is new, but most of it is old that needs to be resuscitated or upgraded so that it can, take on more load. And our money is not only just for connection. So you'll find that with the money that we get from treasurer, instead of achieving, let's say, 400,000 connections on an annual basis, we end up achieving around 130,000 connections on an annual basis. Why? Because most of the money must go into resuscitating dilapidated infrastructure. That is key for us as a department to be able to achieve those connections. And unfortunately, without resuscitating that old infrastructure, those connections will never be achieved. So a bulk of our money that we receive from treasurer, about 40% of it goes into bulk infrastructure projects that are key for us achieving those connections. And that figure that I just presented is actually rising. I know that back in the days, the money that we received from treasurer, about 30% of it was allocated towards resuscitating old infrastructure. Over the years, it has risen to over 45%. And at the moment, actually 50% of the money that we receive from treasurer goes towards resuscitating old infrastructure, because without resuscitating that old infrastructure, those connections will never be achieved. Hence, our goal of achieving universal access come 2030 with the money that we get from treasurer is at risk. Hence, the repurposing of INEP is very key. But yeah, I'll go into the details once I get to those slides. If we can go into the next slide. Okay, so this slide is just looking to the key stakeholders, colleagues, who are your ESCOM municipalities, the National Energy Regulator, SALGA, obviously National Treasurer being the key stakeholder because they are our funder, and obviously our contractors within municipalities, ESCOM, and the department. To the next slide, please. As I earlier said, the model, the current model is such that we get the money from treasurer. That money from treasurer is then allocated for grid electrification and non-grid electrification. With your grid electrification, we have two programs, as I said, which is Schedule 6B, or ESCOM and municipalities as Schedule 5B. And then we have a separate allocation for non-grid electrification, which is just over 230 million on an annual basis. To the next slide, please. Okay, so this one is just the historical performance. And this particular presentation was prepared between 2019-20 up until 23-25. So based on the information between those 5 years, we were planning to get about 917,000 connections, but we only achieved 837,000 connections at an average annual, connection rate of about 167 houses connected on an annual basis. Obviously, the presentation is focusing on the houses connected, but over and above, that period, there are a number of, MV infrastructure networks, that were erected, including building new substations that were necessary for us to be in the position to connect, new households going forward. So we're obviously saying that at the current pace, there is no way that come 2030, the universal access is going to be reached because a bulk of the money goes towards, resuscitating old infrastructure, building new substations, which are necessary because without those substations, there is no way that we are going to be able to connect, new households. If I can give an example, our master plans that are completed for the 6 provinces indicated that just in KZN alone, there were about 19 substations that are supposed to be on the ground as we speak that haven't started. And of course, without those substations, you are not going to be in the position to connect, new households. Which then takes us to obviously looking at other means of connecting those people. And those means include off-grid solutions, which are your standalone PV solars and your microgrids. But I will talk more to that when I get to the repurposed INEP. Also, on our non-grid program, with the allocation that we have been getting, there are over 200,000 people that have been connected through non-grid, electrification program. But the unfortunate part about the electrification that happens through our non-grid program is that about 40% of those systems that we have installed over the years are no longer working for a number of reasons. There are concession agreements that were cancelled, and in the cancellation of those concession agreements, those systems were left, unattended to, and people have tampered with them, and hence a number of them are no longer working. And the municipalities, because these systems were not installed by them, they are also not involved in maintenance, of those systems. But with the repurposed INEP, all those problems are going to be taken care of. So just at high level, our off-grid, program provides a temporary relief to the people that are outside grid plans for more than 3 years. So when we go into these areas and we electrify people through our off-grid solutions, the system only provides for lighting and charging purposes, cell phone charging purposes, together with DC television watching, but it doesn't give any relief for refrigeration, air conditioning, uh, water heating, and it's a very small system. It's a 150-watt peak system, and I think through experience we know that our beneficiaries out there do not want the system. Uh, That's why going forward, even this system is being revisited, and we are no longer going to be rolling out DC solar home systems. If you can go to the next slide, please, Mkita. Okay, so these are just the connections that have been achieved, uh, up until the 31st of March 2025, between the municipal program and the ESCOM program. And as you can see at the bottom, this slide is saying to us, we achieved just over 136,000 connections, which is still far below the targeted, connections of at least 300,000 per annum for us to be able to address the 1.6 million backlog come the end of 2030. And as I earlier said, the reason we are achieving these connections is because 40 to 45% of the funds that we get from Treasury goes towards resuscitating old infrastructure or even building new bulk projects. So obviously these are the current challenges which are known to everyone, and I don't think I want to, uh, dwell onto them. But the presentation is going to be shared with everyone. So if you want to ask questions on these challenges, you are more than welcome to do so. So if you can move to the next slide, Nkita. So obviously, our key focus now is to electrify the backlog of 1.6 million by 2030. And we know that because we are chasing a moving target, by 2030, not everyone will be connected, to energy. But we are saying that if come 2030, we have reached 97%, as a department, we will have achieved, our goal. And we obviously, going forward, want to support social and economic development. And we want universal access to meet basic electricity requirements of all citizens, in the country. Uh, we obviously are also looking at alleviating energy poverty, specifically in, rural areas and peri-urban areas. And all these are going to be informed by the new action plan for INEP that was approved in cabinet sometime last year. I think it was in September of 2025. And we are saying that the new INEP model will obviously adopt a hybrid approach. So instead of focusing on electrifying, citizens through grid, we're also going to use, off-grid solutions, which include your standalone PV solars and your microgrids. And we've started doing it. There are a number of projects that have been executed within the municipalities by ESCOM and municipalities that are purely standalone PV solar and microgrids. If you can move to the next slide. So obviously, the objectives and the scope of the new INEP action plan includes, all these things that are highlighted in this slide, which is the analysis of the electrification programs, the technology and future plans assessment, the affordability and financial sustainability, and project management and implementation. So at high level, INEP is still going to carry on the way it has been done over the past 20 years within the department with the money that we are getting from Treasury. But over and above that, the department is establishing a project management office that is going to be located within DBSA. And that project management office is going to be funded through multilateral development banks and is going to be doing exactly the same thing that the department is doing. Obviously, the reason why replicating things within DBSA is because we're trying our level best to reach the target of 300,000 connections come the end of each financial year. And our biggest problem is that Treasury has made it clear to us that there is no more money that is going to be given to the department other than the money that has been allocated. So we know as a department that between now and 2030, the money that is available to us from Treasury is about 20 billion. But our calculations have suggested to us as a department that for us to be able to address the backlog, we need a total of about 75 billion. Now, that says to us as a department, there is a shortfall of about 55 billion that must be raised. And obviously, how is this money going to be raised? It's going to be raised through multilateral development banks. And we have started that process. And we're working together with the World Bank, together with AFDB, together with FCDO, and we're engaging, other potential donors. But I will get to the slide, I think, in the next few slides. So it's just that I tend to talk a lot, uh, before getting to the actual slide. So the current status of electrification, I think I've covered that one, Zimkita. So we can go to the next slide. And we're saying that with the repurpose INEP, we need technology fit for purpose. So obviously, with the new INEP action plan, we've developed a criteria that guides us as a department whether the area is going to be electrified through grid or through off-grid solutions. And one of the things that we have looked at is the proximity towards the existing grid, and we set areas that falls outside 15 kilometers of existing grid will obviously be electrified through off-grid solutions. But that on its own, as much as, is part of the new INEP action plan, we are no longer even sticking to it. There are areas that are within 2 kilometers of existing grid that we electrify using off-grid solutions for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is that you might find that the grid is there, but it doesn't have capacity, to take on more load. And due to the challenges that municipalities are having with ESCOM is refusing to increase the capacity for that particular municipality because probably that municipality is having an historical debt with ESCOM and they cannot address, that debt at the moment. So those houses will remain unelectrified as long as the municipality is unable to, to address that debt. So we'll go in as a department and we will fund that project depending on the density of the household. That particular project will then be electrified through a microgrid or standalone PV solars. Hence, I'm saying that when we crafted the action plan, this is the criteria that we came up with, but things on the ground are driving us, to do something obviously not in line with what the action plan pointed us to do. And that is informed by a number of things that we find on the ground. So obviously, the criteria also then talks to the population density. It talks to the geographical, space that the project is sitting in together with the terrain. If you can just go back to the last slide, Zimkita. Yeah, it also talks to the energy demand within the project area. And it's also informed by the cost per connection that will be incurred while executing those projects. So as a department, we've put a cap that any project whose cost per connection is going to be more than 70,000 is going to be done via off-grid solutions. You can go to the next slide. So these are the tiers that we came up with together with Sanedi that are going to be used going forward. In fact, we've started using it. There is a project that we just completed in Eastern Cape, in Umtata, for the people that were affected by the floods of June last year. If you remember that particular area, it's a total of about 200 households. They were electrified through 600 watts AC solar home system that was coupled by a 3-plate gas stove together with 2 gas cylinders for cooking. I'm not sure what happened to the presentation. Is my time up? Mr. Kuluse?
Yes, I think we just over by 10 minutes. Maybe you can just wrap up in 2 minutes, Mr. Tlabati.
Okay, it's very unfortunate because I still wanted to cover the repurposing of INEP. But okay, maybe at high level, Mr. Kuluse and the colleagues, is that within the grid program, which is based with both municipalities and ESCOM, National Treasury has allowed us as a department to use off-grid solutions to electrify project areas. So as much as we presented that the grid is divided into municipal and ESCOM program, within those programs, we are now allowing municipalities and ESCOM to use off-grid solutions to electrify people. And there are a number of projects that we have completed countrywide. With the non-grid electrification, this current year, which is 26-27, is the last year where the department is rolling out DC solar home systems. Going forward, we are going to only roll out AC solar home systems, starting with a minimum of 600 watts and the maximum being the 5 kilowatt. I'm saying 5 kilowatt because I know that in the INEP action plan, our biggest system was a 3 kilowatt system, but there are project areas that we have electrified using a 5 kilowatt system countrywide. And the beneficiaries are very happy with the system that the department has rolled out. And all our off-grid solutions are coupled with the 3-plate gas stove for cooking, accompanied by two 9 kg gas cylinders. And as I earlier said, that we are aware that the money that we have from Treasury is not going to be enough for us to cover or to address universal access come 2030. So we are approaching development banks for extra funding. And to this end, there are funds that have been approved by AFDB, particularly for the 4 municipalities that are sitting within the Mpumalanga province that are affected by the closure of the power stations. So that project is going to start next year and is meant to run all the way up until 2032. And there are funds that have been approved for those 4 municipalities. And obviously our plan, if that project in Mpumalanga is successful, is to replicate it countrywide, just to ensure that come 2030, the universal access is addressed. I think because of the fact that I've taken more than my share, I will end there and I will be available to take questions. Thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Hlabati. And I think the message is very clear. The government is working very, very hard to eliminate the energy poverty in the country. And while doing that, you're ensuring that there is a drive for industrialization. Thank you for the wonderful presentation, and apologies that we have short time, but we will quickly move over to the next section, which is our presentation, and that will be followed by a discussion. This segment will be led by our moderator, our CEO, Dr. Ritabile Milamo. Dr. Milamo, over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you very much, session moderator. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very, very much for joining us. Mr. Hlabati, there will be an opportunity to engage with the audience later on in the meeting. We did see some comments in the chat box requesting for us to get a deeper dive into the repurposed INEP. But I think the presentations that will come in the next couple of minutes will begin to perhaps address some of the challenges and the risks that you have highlighted. And really the purpose of this is to support the government's effort in ensuring that universal access becomes a reality. And we do believe that our technology is well placed, is well positioned to enable and support government's ambitions for universal access by 2030. Without any further ado, colleagues, I am incredibly honored that we are graced this afternoon by experts and authorities in the universal access space. These are individuals that have been in the space for decades, and I would like to hear from them. And I'm mindful of time, and I would like to then introduce our first speaker, Ms. Sarah Malm. She is the CEO or the Executive Director, depending on how you want to frame it, of Googler. She will give us an overview of Googler, but Ms. Malm has extensive experience in this space. having worked with the US Power Africa platform amongst her other achievements. Sarah, it is a privilege and honor to have you here, and I will be relatively strict with time, and I know you've been allocated 15 minutes. So when you do have 5 minutes left, I will nudge you. And the purpose being to leave at least 15 minutes at the end of all the presentations for the audience to engage with you, and really just to give us ideas on what to focus on in this new working group that most of the attendees will then be invited to really shape this initiative and program, and to ensure that we support government's plans to achieve universal access by 2030. Ms. Saramam, it's an honor and privilege to have you with us this afternoon, and without any further ado, I would like to invite you to make, I hope it's a 15 minutes presentation, and then I will nudge you definitely in 10 minutes time to indicate that you have 5 minutes left. Sarah, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get started. Give me 1 second here. And not letting me go into present mode. Okay, I don't know why. Oh, there we go. How's that? Can you see it?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, wonderful.
Perfect. Yes, we can see it.
First of
Thanks,
all,
Sarah. Take it
let
away.
me say the pleasure is all mine. This is an incredible group. We could spend hours on the first presentation, so thank you so much. My name is Sarah Malm. I am the Executive Director of GOGLA, which is the Global Off-Grid Solar Association. We work very closely with SAPVIA, and it is really my honor to be here. So I'm going to take a broader view as a global association, and I'm adapting a presentation that just out of interest I gave in China a few months ago to companies that were not familiar with the policy environment in sub-Saharan Africa. So I'm taking that view coming into it. So the way GOGLA works is similar to many associations, is we represent members and investors, and we work very closely with national governments, in particular DFIs and others, to advocate and create an enabling environment for market conditions and for companies to be able to scale. And we do this in very concrete ways. Similar to what we're launching today, we have working groups, and they are incredibly important for us to be able to prepare the technical material that is required specifically to talk in the policy space. Another vehicle that we use is something that we call the Community of Champions. And I think that this is an important vehicle. In our experience, many people that work, particularly in the Ministry of Energy, but in other ministries, have an engineering background and are not very familiar with off-grid solar. Our goal is to create a network of national government bureaucrats, people across ministries that understand off-grid solar, they understand how it works, and they are connected to the members and the investors that are driving the sector. We sit as the Secretariat. We meet virtually a few times a year, and we bring the whole group together. We will do this at our forum in October for a whole week of in-person engagement. Why this is important is that if we need someone to call, we know that we have individuals who are really dedicated to understanding the unique aspects of accelerating off-grid solar. We also have our regional representatives, which are people that are working based in East, West, and Southern Africa. We have our Southern Africa Senior Regional Representative, Colin Gumbo, on the call today. The way that we work through inform, convene, and influence, information that comes out of our working group with our policy papers are extremely important in capturing the complex policy environment. Our convening, as we're doing today online, but also in person, is essential for bringing the whole industry together. And our influence piece, which is what I want to talk about today, how do we get the job done? How do we advocate for policy? One thing that came up in the earlier presentation was this idea of inter and intra-governmental coordination. We have found that it is essential that we not just look at the ministries of energy or ministries of power, but that we are working across all ministries to make sure that we have advocates within them. Another piece which I think is essential is data. And data is missing in a lot of aspects. We know, for example, that 10 million solar home systems were sold last year in 2025. That's an enormous achievement. But what does that mean to the Minister of Finance, who may be making decisions on how to allocate decisions on where to deploy their energy priorities? So what we need as a sector and what we are working on as a sector is to really understand impact. And I know that my colleagues from Sun King will be well placed to talk about this, but I do want to pick up on a priority around economic impact, showing the job creation and the potential for skills development in the industry. And that is an area that we as an association are very committed to making sure that national government decision makers have the data and the information in order to be champions to accelerate the deployment of DRE and off-grid solar. So I'm going to just switch ahead. I think we all know what public policy helps us do. And I'm going to take this forward into the next slide and talk a little bit about the big thing right now, which is Mission 300. It was mentioned before. We know. I'm sorry?
Good. This
Like, colleagues, can you please mute yourself? There's somebody on there.
They've extended that tender, so it's closing tomorrow.
Miss
Mailani? There's a document that you need to.
I think you can. Okay, there you go.
Okay.
Mission 300, the AFDB and World Bank partnership to reach 300 million connections by 2030. To achieve that, about 45% needs to come from off-grid solar and DRE. So from a mathematical point of view, this is what has to happen. It is the fastest to scale and the least cost technology that is out there that will be able to achieve these goals. What we know is that there is a lot of challenges to translate this into the national energy compacts and into the national energy planning. So I want to go through a little bit of where the opportunities are and where we see some places that are behind. One thing that is worth the time to take is looking at these compacts in detail. And one example is in many of the compacts, there is no definition around transmission line planning. It doesn't define where they're going to go. And because of that, it makes it very difficult for the DRE and off-grid sector to understand where they need to cooperate and target in terms of deploying off-grid solar. So the point being that this alignment and this coordination is going to be essential for these national energy compacts to work. I think the bank and AFDB are doing an exceptional job in bringing national governments together. However, I think that the national energy compacts can knit together better. And really where the rubber hits the road is that the responsibility clearly sits with national governments in their integrated energy planning and their national energy plans to understand how they are going to achieve these goals, balancing the technologies and the investments that they need to make. So a couple of examples of this, of where access and targets and the role of off-grid solar are significant. There is, for example, in Malawi, one of the instruments that has been successful is the Noi 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 Fund. The reason is because the national government was partner and invested in those funds. So there is a significant there's a significant investment by the national government to make sure that the instruments that are required are there and are receiving funding. Tanzania will stand out as a national energy compact that has not defined any targets around off-grid solar. So the point of this is that there are access targets being laid out under Mission 300, but the national energy compacts have not completed how they're going to get there. And this is most crucial in the role of DRE and off-grid solar. So one of our pushes is to get that level of specificity as best that we can into these energy planning so that we know where the deployment will happen and the commitment of the government to behind off-grid solar and DRE more broadly. In terms of national planning, some, as we know, have included off-grid solar and DRE, some have not. Again, one of the areas that we'd really like to push is making sure that not only is acceleration of energy access, but the incorporation around productive uses. And I think it's important to take a moment. A lot of conversations focus on energy access. And I don't need to tell this group that energy access is a lot bigger than just turning on a light or getting power. It is about productivity. It's about increasing farmers' yields. It's about digital inclusion. It is about all the aspects that really enhance the quality of life. And because of that, we are very aggressive in making sure that under Mission 300 and National Energy Plannings, that more ministries and more aspects of the benefits of energy access are related. And so one of the areas that we're really pushing on is the renewable energy productive use strategies and roadmaps. Kenya has been particularly strong in this area. Rwanda, Ethiopia, Uganda have all taken steps to look at how the use of energy and DRE is actually enhancing livelihoods, incomes, and productivity in the area. So we think that this needs to really go hand in hand with energy planning. A trend and a really important aspect of this, and I think this was picked up in the earlier presentation, is around affordability. And clearly, in the hardest to reach areas where there is little or no ability to pay, policy has an enormous effect on what costs get passed to the consumer, what costs companies absorbed, and the effects of these. And I think it's also important to recognize that a number of these are shared across the broader industry. So import duties and VAT exemptions don't necessarily affect just the off-grid solar industry, but the more broader industry. So the importance of joining and aligning around and understanding and mapping these is really essential. And it's an area for us that we spend an enormous amount of time tracking and advocating for these kind of exemptions and the enabling environment, which directly affects affordability. I'll move on to the next. Quality standards is another area that I think it's important as an association, and it's a very uneven space sort of across the continent. What are the standards that need to be adopted to make sure that these products are safe, that they're durable, and that they have the aspects that are required for them to have the longevity? As our earlier speaker noted, the longevity of these products are part and parcel due to, one, they need to meet quality standards. Two, they need to have warranties. And 3, they need to have after-sales service. So the quality and standards aspect to this is also a key area for us that we continually work with national governments and across to make sure that we have accepted standards for the industry. So, what was that a beat? I think we've had a good overview of South Africa, so I am going to skip ahead. And I want to focus a little bit on another trend, which is around procurement and bulk procurement. Procurement in and of itself is a tried and trusted way to purchase. And I think that the pharmaceutical industry and vaccinations is a really good example of where bulk procurement has worked well. Where it doesn't work well is when the key aspects of after-sales service, warranty, and quality standards are not in place. And one area of concern for us is that bulk procurement looks like a very attractive way for national government to purchase a lot of systems all at once, white label them, whatever it is, bring them in. We have seen in places like Madagascar where this has not worked. It doesn't work because the essential aspects of how a off-grid product is managed by a company, the fact that it is very customer-centric and it requires a warranty and a quality and after sales that is linked to the longevity of the product. So another area that we are tracking is this trend towards bulk procurement and making sure that if a national government is considering this, that the right parameters are in place to make sure that the longevity of the product and the consumer are protected. I think there's probably not enough time to go into detail about results-based financing, but the financing of off-grid solar and the relationship between the national government and the company and the consumer is a complex one. And one area that we spend a very, very significant amount of time on is to make sure that the payments and the way that these results-based financing operate, that they allow for a sustainable market, that they allow for companies to continue to deliver and to provide customer service in a way that doesn't have a huge amount of obstacles. So verification on site is a really big key one, understanding the payment delays. But the long and the short is really strengthening the communication between the units that manage the results-based financing and the companies to ensure that there is sustainability of the market. That's a very, very high level on that, but this is really an important piece of what we do, is looking at financing and linking that to sustainability and linking that to affordability. It's a key aspect of the market and an area of priority for us. Tax exemption is another one. I think this is pretty self-explanatory, but it is ways for us, particularly in Kenya, where we've had significant success to make sure around the affordability issue that tax exemptions are retained for the industry. So I'm going to stop there. That was a really fast, high overview, but I thought I would end with a nice quote from SAPVIA and the chairperson. And thank you for the opportunity to take some time and focus on this, and also looking forward to the other speakers.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, Sarah. That was an insightful presentation. As the South African market, we just only starting in this space, and our cooperation and collaboration with you will be critical in sort of getting it right. And you already highlighted issues or solutions to some of the issues that the previous speakers has highlighted. I think you indicated that the policy has to be clear, it has to be specific, right? But I think what was really useful, at least for us, is to begin to focus on productive use of renewable energy, or to think about it as we shape and formulate the focus of the working group. That issues of energy access are critical and important, but they are but one component of addressing energy poverty, and that renewable energy, especially in those remote areas, need to address issues of productivity for farmers. It needs to address issues around service delivery, health service delivery, perhaps education. And so really, really, really insightful. So thank you very much. We look forward to working together even more closely once we frame and shape the focus of the working group. Our next speakers, if the colleagues can please beam their presentation, is Dr. Karen Surich. Dr. Karen is a very good partner of ours, and for my sins, I worked with her in my previous life. And as I always say, she's one of the most passionate people about energy poverty, energy access, and the solutions that we need as a country and as a continent. She's located in a very progressive entity, SANEDI. She'll probably share a bit about SANEDI, but SANEDI is a good partner of ours. I'm sure we'll be signing an MOU soon. We've been exploring areas of collaboration for a while now, and it is really a privilege to have you here. Dr. Karen, we did see that you will be a critical component to the implementation of the repurposed INEP. And again, I just want to reiterate that we are here as an industry association to support the work that you do, to support the work that government is currently doing to ensure that you achieve your goals by 2030. And we benefit from the experience of Googler, as Sarah has indicated, and some of the speakers that will come to the fore. We're learning actually from the rest of the continent who most of the countries are way, way more advanced than we are in this space. And I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel at all. There are great examples of models. Without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Dr. Karen, to take the participants through your presentation and the work that SANEDI is currently undertaking in collaboration with the department. And perhaps you can reflect on how we can begin to work together. And please give us propositions and suggestions on what to focus on as an industry. Dr. Karen, over to you.
Thank you so much, Rethabile. I'm hoping you can see my slides clearly. I think I'm just going to greet everyone on the camera and then close the camera off for bandwidth. I'm presenting from a venue where we're currently giving training. This presentation is designed to build on the INEP action plan presented by Mr. Ntlabati earlier. And essentially what we are focusing on is, of course, achieving that universal access, but it's not going to be done using the traditional approach and the traditional technologies. And the reason is, and I'll get to it as we move through, that we have to be innovative with our approach to technology. And that's one of the things that SANEDI does, is looking at, and Mr. Ntlabati used the phrase, which I think they're going to put on my tombstone one day, is fit for purpose. Making sure that what we do deploy for this country is delivering and is fit for purpose. And so what SANEDI does is we, in fact, inform policy using fact-based technology interventions, demonstration projects, data, and so forth. And we're also involved to a large extent, and in fact, that's where I'm sitting today, is in capacity development and thought sharing. And thought leadership, because we often offer trainings in certain sectors as well. So just broadly, if we look at electricity access, it's not just about keeping the lights on. It feeds into the absolute essential lifeblood of our economy and our existence as human beings. So education, health, jobs and economy, and just the dignity and safety, if we're looking down a pyramid. So we need to make sure that we have access to electricity to be able to serve all of these things. Without any of the steps on this pyramid, we don't have a way of developing further. So why does electricity access matter? For every dollar, and this is from the IEA, invested in electrification, you get about a $4 return in socioeconomics. And so it's important to remember that to advance, especially with the technology that we as a human race are developing continually at the moment, forward and be able to serve that, we have to have electricity access. So where we stand at the moment, we need to divide energy poverty into four main categories: the energy consumption capacity, the supply capacity, our infrastructure completeness, and the utilization or cleanliness of our energy. So if we just take a look at the state of actual electricity access, globally, only about 89% of people have access to electricity, and regionally in Africa, 89%. In South Africa, we're doing pretty well at 94%. As you heard from Mr. Ntlabati's presentation, we came up from about 34% in 1994 to achieve a whopping 94% as we stand today. However, what that means is the quick wins and the easy to connects are done, which means now the remaining households, which is about 1.6 million households, are sitting in informal settlements, remote rural areas that are difficult to get to, or in municipalities with low technical and financial capability or capacity. So if we just look at some of the SDGs, the global ones, SDG 7 says we will ensure access to affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy for all by 2030. Now, South African government parallels this exactly. They are wanting to deliver universal access, and universal access is defined by the international definition as 97%. Our government has said we get as close to that 100% moving target as possible. And so the main targets around this is how do we give universal access to electricity, to clean cooking, making sure we get renewables into the mix there, and obviously with an improved energy efficiency, because that affects the costs as well, by enhancing infrastructure, finance, and obviously the technology cooperation. Now, as we sit at the moment, and as you heard in Mr. Ntlabati's presentation also, we are not on track. So we have to accelerate this. This is just as I was saying, universal access defined at 97%. Sorry, I'm seeing a hand. I'm not sure if you can still all hear me and see.
We can hear you and see, Dr.
Okay.
Karen. And Dr. Lucky, please drop your
Sorry,
whatever
might be
question
something
you may
wrong.
have. No, we can hear you perfectly. Please go ahead.
Okay, great, thank you. So essentially, the universal access basically means that all households can meet their minimum basic electricity requirements, like lighting and appliances. So South Africa, as we sit, is at about 94% national access. 99% of that is in the urban areas and 75% in the rural. So the INEP, the Integrated National Electrification Program, looks at addressing this universal access. So about 6% of our households, which is about 1.6 million households, are not yet electrified. And this last part is going to be expensive and difficult to do. So we've been hit with a lot of challenges over the way. We've had load shedding, we've had supply instability, which impacts reliability and trust. So now what you have to consider is if we're going to build that infrastructure, we already have to operate and maintain our aging infrastructure as well as deal with grid congestion. So if we're going to build that infrastructure, how affordable will it be? So if we start to look at lower income areas, a lot of these in the deep rural areas, will that be affordable? Also in the informal settlements, we have the issues with legal and technical barriers because of informal connections. And then, of course, institutional capacity. Our municipal governance in many areas, as Mr. Ntlabati alluded to, is requiring some support. So these are the barriers to this access. So essentially, where there's a technical component, a financial component, an institutional component, and then a social component. And all of these need to fit together in a puzzle that then allows us to have a bird's eye view of the barriers and how we would then approach overcoming these challenges. So if we start looking at the affordability and the funding shortfalls, if you look at things like a traditional grid connection, you start seeing high upfront costs. You've got connections, meters, wiring in the house, and so forth. You've got the affordability of tariffs and funding shortfalls in this space. So you need to consider the effect of all of these. And there's a bit of a breakdown here. These slides are available, so please feel free to share them. I won't go through everything in the interests of time. So from a technical perspective, we do have grid limitations. We do have remoteness and sometimes a constrained supply. So we need to consider things like the logistics, the administrative costs, whether or not our skills and labor, if we have enough of that to operate, maintain, and secure our electrical infrastructure. And then, of course, all the other costs that come with unforeseen circumstances. So if we look at, for example, shallow electrification costs, this is now at your household level. You've got a cost there, but you've also got a cost to get it to your household. And so at an institutional level, we've got things like governance, regulatory, and municipal capacity, as well as some policy gaps that disconnect the national goals from the actual implementation. On a social side, and I always say, actually, for me, this is one of the most important components of that puzzle, is that you have to have social buy-in, you have to have social understanding and support for the bigger picture that we are all trying to promote towards this universal access. And that needs to be addressed at a grassroots level in order to be successful with any plans that we have. Feeding directly into that is the acceptance of the technologies that will need to be employed. So sometimes I sit and I think, and sometimes I just sit, but while I was thinking, this is one of the things that makes sense to me, is that if we're sitting with solar technologies in South Africa, where are we from these three bubbles? Policy, technology, and society. And as I said, society is really, for me, the governing one. If you don't have the buy-in from society, it's going to affect energy security, decarbonization, technology uptake. All of that will be affected by it, because if people don't understand and accept something, they won't allow it in. From a technology perspective, look, we don't have a lot of localization potential happening in the country at the moment, but and battery energy systems are still quite expensive, but there is technology available, and the policies are there to support that. So how do we unlock the access through this technology? We start to look at the different technology options, and these I would like to unpack a little, because these are what is suggested in the INEP action plan that was presented to Cabinet and supported last year, September. So first out of the box, we have the traditional grid tied, suitable for urban and peri-urban areas. Obviously, it's got a higher upfront cost, and this cost can really vary from 10,000 Rand to 135,000 Rand, depending on where you are. And the decision-making matrix for this will be in one of the next slides, but it's the same one that Mr. Ntlabati presented. Option 1, option 2, and option 3 are microgrid solutions. All of them are AC, so alternating current. All of them have a battery backup. And all of them are designed to be scalable. So if you're starting with option 1, which would be your lowest cost, and it would essentially serve your free basic electricity services, it's very cost efficient, but it has a limited capacity. You can scale up through option 2 or option 3. So for example, option 3 would be, and it was in the slides presented earlier, would be something like a 3 kilowatt system with a battery backup with solar PV. In all of these options, what is essential to be implemented is something that supports the heating requirements. So hot water, cooking, space heating. And those can be any number of technologies, so long as they avoid as much electricity use as possible, because that will give you the best cost effectiveness for implementing solar PV with a battery energy storage system. So if we start to look, and this is why I said we'll move with the INEP action plan into a space where we're looking at decentralized energy solutions. So we are applying technologies that up until now have not been the standard practice. Standard practice was we connect to Eskom, here we go. This is now a case of, or connect to the municipality with Eskom power. This is now a case of, all right, we are going to have some decentralized standalone micro or mini grids. We're going to have to consider hybrid configurations or even fully renewable mini grids that are looking at a cleaner energy option. So the idea is that these are the options, and we have a number of selection criteria that talk to this. Now, this slide was in Mr. Ntlabati's presentation, But what it does is it outlines the 5 main criteria used for selection. So the first one is the distance to the grid infrastructure. If you're more than 15 kilometers out, it starts to get too expensive. If it's a low population density, and therefore obviously a low energy demand, what's on number 4 here, then it also starts to look more attractive to consider a microgrid solution. Things like the geography. If it's flat and easily accessible, then grid extension or expansion is more plausible. But if you're starting to go into difficult geography and terrain, it starts to look more attractive to have standalone grids. And in this case, mini and microgrids that have a lot of solar dependence. But finally, of course, the deciding factor is always the cost per connection. So if the cost per connection is exceeding a certain threshold, then we need to consider microgrids because they offer a more affordable alternative. And that affordability is carried down to the consumer, obviously. So, we can't be putting down very expensive connections and then the consumer can't afford to pay for them anyway. So there's something else to consider, and that is the digital innovation, which is driving access. So AI, it's forecasting demand, but it's also requiring a huge amount of energy and electricity. The Internet of Things, looking at things like mobile pay platforms and remote diagnostics. So all of this technology to control and maintain and operate and stabilize the technology on the ground needs to be put into place also. And it needs to become sort of commonplace in terms of understanding. The familiarity you have with your cell phone will have to be the familiarity that you have with your electricity supply. So then we need to take a step back and go, all right, well, if with policies in place, what are those mechanisms looking like and what are the possible financing mechanisms? And that's really something that will drive uptake. So we have to have robust policy frameworks. We have to have sustainable and plausible financing mechanisms that fit for purpose to South African requirements, which will not be the same across the country. They will be different for different areas or different communities. So essentially, the community needs to be behind you, even if it's municipal-led initiatives. This can also lead to creating new business models and obviously leading towards win-win in tariffs. That's the plan. So the strategic framework for South Africa is this 97% that's internationally accepted as universal access needs to be to affordable, reliable, and sustainable electricity in line with SDG 7 and the just energy transition, because obviously we have to transition our energy supply, not necessarily just because we want to reduce carbon emissions or emissions from coal-fired power stations, but also because we have to shift towards a more blended energy mix for energy security purposes. So what the JET does, and I wanted to put a little bit about JET in here, because at a community level in the energy space, JET will play quite a role in terms of the economics and developing industry behind this electricity space, which can be either off-grid or on-grid and decentralized solutions and so forth. So we do need to consider that we have to integrate the green economy so that we can make sure that we have inclusivity across the spectrum. So collaborative governance is definitely something that will need to be in place for scale. We need to look at things like municipal delivery of electricity, ESCOM delivery of electricity, where are the IPPs fitting into this space? All of these need clear roles, coordination, and the funding pathways to achieve universal access. So fitting into all of this is we can't be, building stuff if we don't have people that know how to build, operate, and maintain and protect it. So it's important to remember that skills and empowering our workforce is absolutely paramount. It also helps with that social integration because you're creating jobs, you're developing skills, and then ultimately you are delivering a quality product that will then lead back to that loop of social acceptance and social demand towards a rollout of more decentralized solutions. So in conclusion, and I hope I'm still within time, electricity access is really foundational for our economic development in the country. It feeds into absolutely everything, like we spoke about in our pyramid, from human dignity all the way up to economic development through health and education as well. rural, informal, and marginalized communities have still got major gaps. And this is why we have to change the way we think about the technologies that we're implementing. We need to match our technology with what we need in South Africa. It's very nice to adopt stuff, but you always have to adapt it also. It must fit with the needs that we have specific for us. Policy, finance, and governments are just as important as infrastructure, because if those things are not in place, you won't have any infrastructure. And finally, and for me, one of the most critical ones is that community involvement. The community involvement and the innovation are absolutely essential for sustainability moving forwards. And with that, I will say thank you very much. This work was done in conjunction with the University of Pretoria, who've been supporting us in the INEP development of the INEP action plan, which was presented to Cabinet.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, Dr. Karen. It's very clear that SANEDI has spent ordinate amount of time in understanding how to take INEP to the next level. I think I can sum up your presentation into one phrase. Whatever we do, it must be fit for purpose.
Thank you.
And throughout your presentation, you have essentially demonstrated that what you're talking about here is not just about getting access to energy, that the impact and the ripple effect is fourfold when it comes to socio-economic development or socio-economic imperatives perspective. So thank you very much. It's very clear that there will be a lot of collaborations on this specific subject. I know we work on a whole lot of other related subjects such as skills development, innovation, as you've highlighted, but I think on universal access, and I know skills and innovation are critical to this specific area, but I was just indicating that we work in that space more broadly.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Appreciate it. I hope you'll still be here in the next 30 minutes. I know you are in training currently, but we hope that you'll be able to engage with the audience in the next while. So we've heard from associations, we've heard from government entities or government and research entities, and the next speaker brings the private sector perspective and will give us insights on how to finance. I think Sarah alluded to issues around quality and standards, which will be critical in the South African market. I think Dr. Karen has indicated that we've done the easy work. The 3 or 4% is going to be difficult. And we would like to then work with the private sector ourselves to assist government in achieving its goals. And with that, it gives me a great pleasure to welcome the next speaker, Dr. Wale Aboyade, who is the Vice President at SunKing, responsible for policy and government relation. I hope I didn't butcher your title, Dr. Wale. But Dr. Wale has extensive experience in issues of energy in general, but on issues of universal access specifically. And I will not read any of these bios, colleagues. I will share these bios with you at the end of this session so that you see the experience that our speakers do come with. Dr. Wale, I'm going to hand over to you. Your time starts now and it will be cut off at 14:15. And if you start seeing my face come up on the screen, just know that your time is almost over. Over to you, Doc.
Thank you, Dr. Melamu. I will certainly note that. And I do realize that it has been a long day. But first of all, my deepest thanks to SAPVIA and the broader members for putting this together, for getting behind this extremely important topic. I have dedicated, I would say, pretty much most of my career to this topic of universal energy access across Africa, as you've mentioned, Dr. Melamu, and been involved in doing this pretty much, everywhere across the world, and particularly everywhere across Africa. And I've always wondered what happened, why those same conversations weren't happened to the same level, right, in South Africa. But, from last year, especially under the leadership of the current minister, we started to see that political will change and move towards a decision that, by 2030, we need to see universal energy access. And that really filled me with a lot of excitement, particularly now, seeing that advanced through INEP's repurposing, recognizing a lot of the challenges that INEP has faced over the years and bringing in partners like Sanedi, and DBSA, and of course the MDBs to put heads together to try to solve this on behalf of South Africa. Watching all of that from the sidelines was really just, I was really cheering that finally, South Africa has joined this chorus and is ready to push. And now to have the private sector get involved through this working group is just a cherry on top of that cake. Because it now shows that that last piece is in there. The government has been pulling together a lot of partners and, have private sector mobilizing, particularly the most important private sector really when it comes to closing that gap, as we've seen from many of the presentations early on, that solar has a unique place in closing that gap because of its distributed nature, because of, reductions in battery cost and so many other reasons. It presents sort of like the really best opportunity compared to status quo, compared to the grid. And again, we've heard those numbers. That's more than ever before. We have a chance to actually close that gap once and for all. We're seeing that happen at incredible pace across the world, and I'll show that, and certainly in Africa. And it's great to see that South Africa is not being left behind. So with that said, let me just quickly talk about Sunking for those who don't know what Sunking is, what kind of company it is. But it's basically a company that delivers last mile solar energy, as well as energy efficient appliances to off-grid households and businesses, and also underserved households and businesses. So think of your, rural villages, think of your peri-urban areas, think of your, informal settlements. Those are the customers that Sunking was established to address and provide solar energy to. And the company is almost 20 years old now. Started with if you look at this chart, it just shows how our products have evolved over the years from 2009, where initially we started with solar lanterns, because at that point, that was the most affordable solar products that you could get that people could afford. And it was lighting, as we've heard, is a basic need that people just wasn't having, right? And they were waiting for the grid. So 20 years ago, before solar systems became really cheap, solar lanterns were sort of like the most affordable way in which you could use solar to be able to provide energy for the poor. And that's where we started. But since then, we've quickly evolved to broader solar home systems that come packaged with different appliances, as you can see in that photo. And then we also launched AC solar systems from 600 watts all the way to 30 kilowatts, and which allows for productive use, and particularly, households use those systems. But what we've seen is that businesses who are in these underserved communities and households also need power. And these inverters really serve their needs. And recently, we also launched a particular productive use appliance, deep freezer, that allows for small businesses to serve their cooling needs. And then, as part of all of this, one of the things we start to hear back from our customers is it's great to have the solar system, but we're still borrowing somebody else's phone. We still have difficulty accessing phones. So can you supply us phones? And so we started to also deliver smartphones, because they also matter for connectivity as well. And as I'll talk about this later, our business model actually depends a lot on mobile money payments, which the smartphones help with. So there's that reinforcing benefit of helping to distribute and deliver smartphones to our customers. And then most recently, we started cooking gas, so the LPG as a solution, because we recognized what Dr. Karen had mentioned earlier, which is, and I think Bongani as well, that electricity, lighting and phone charging is not the only energy needs of any household. In fact, as many South Africans on the call we know, your biggest energy bill goes to cooking and heating. And so we realized that, and those are not easily or most efficiently solved by solar. So we decided to set up a cooking gas chain built on the same platform that I will talk about, which will distribute. So our products are not that unique, even though they are. But what is mostly, what really is unique about Sun King, and particularly to this discussion, the way in which we have been able to make a dent as a private sector company in last mile electrification, is because of our model. So what we do is we design our products. Every single product that we have is designed in-house with a large R&D team spread around the world, and built dedicatedly to be able to last the rigors of any rural conditions across Africa, right? In a dusty environment, in a smoky environment, our systems work, and they've been working for 20 years. And that's why people love them and use them across the world. The other parts that we do is distribution. We have two ways to get our products to the last mile. One is working with partners, some of whom are actually on this call, but the other is we have the largest solar delivery network on the continent. 41,000 field agents supported by 4,000 staff, all based in Africa across multiple different countries, including South Africa, with working through branches in almost every local government area in some of the, especially in the countries where we have a major presence. And what happens with these field agents, this over 40,000 field agents, go from home to home, distributing and delivering these solar products. They knock on doors, they find out what the customer needs are, and then they provide them with the right size for that particular household or that particular business. And when they then help this, and by the way, these field agents are all from the local communities. None of them come from anywhere else. And when they also help to install the systems, and when the system has a problem or anything like that, they are available for after-sales support. So they don't just sell and go. Our distribution model means staying there for the long term and ensure that this product can work over time as an electricity service, not just as a product that is delivered. And finally, the final leg of what makes us work is our financing through what's called pay as you go, where our customers don't have to pay for these systems upfront, as you've seen from some of the discussions we've had. The solar, even though the price is coming down, is still expensive, particularly for the lower LSMs. It's particularly more expensive for them. So we finance these products upfront. Customers or end users only need to pay about 10% of the cost upfront. They take it home, and then they pay as they use for anywhere between 9 to sometimes even 5 years, depending on their flexibility and their affordability. And then once they finish paying up for the system, they get to own it. And of course, as we know, solar systems produce for well up to 10 years or more. And based on this particular model, we've been incredibly successful, especially across the rest of the continent, but we hope that the same will happen in South Africa. So we've powering currently 27 million homes across the continent, selling about 31 million products. So some of our customers are repeat customers. We growing this number at an average of, the last time I checked, about 350,000 customers a month. Just let that sink in. 350,000 new customers every month. And 60% out of those are first-time connections. So 60% of those are making a dent in that 600 million figure we heard from Googler, from Sarah from Googler earlier. So we're reaching people faster than any utility on the continent is reaching them with clean, reliable power. And our systems are distributed across 30 countries. About 11 of them, we have direct presence, and many of the rest we work through partners. And to my point earlier about financing, we've been able to extend over $1.6 billion, which is about 20 billion rands, to households that will never have qualified for credit because they're lower LSMs, to be able to allow them to own the systems and work with them. And of course, we have all the agents that help to make all of this work. Close to half of them, which are women. So we are gender integration is really important to us as well. So you'd ask yourself, how does the private sector be able to, a company like us, and we're not the only ones. I mean, Google is the umbrella body for many global companies like ourselves. But you have to ask yourself, how does the private sector do those numbers consistently? What's the secret sauce that maybe we can think about as we, as South Africa looks to open up to this model? And one of the things I'd say here is a point that has been made by many of the colleagues earlier, that a pay-as-you-go solar system is more than just the cost of the upfront system. And that's what repeatedly we've seen across the rest of the world, that where we have the tendency for governments to just do this tender and supply contracts where they just go buy 1,000 systems and supply them to one particular village, we'll find that, yes, they can do it at some relatively cheaper cost because the materials and components are, if you really look at the solar home system life cycle cost, they're relatively low, right? So you can do this at a relatively cheaper cost. But the problem is, without that after-sales support, without that consistent maintenance, these systems break over time, every single time in every single instance across the world where this approach has been taken. And so we understood this very early, and that's why we took this pay-as-you-go approach. That once, first of all, it locks us into a longer-term relationship with the customer. The customer is not paying us once off. If we don't pay the customer, they would. If the customer doesn't get the service, if the system breaks, of course they won't pay us. So we're in there for the long run. But that chart on the bar chart on the left also says that a lot of the cost to keep that system on for 5 or 10 years is something that is not always captured from your traditional procurement models. But leaving that aside and just rushing quickly to this list on the right side, why do we deliver those numbers consistently? One is the product. The product, Google stats show that very few of the products out there that you can just go and buy off the shelf are actually quality verified. And the biggest quality verification body is Verasol globally, that many other countries have adopted. They have pretty stringent standards for what qualifies as a verified solar home system. Now, we see that standard as a minimum. It's a flaw for us. We go beyond that standard, again, because we think more long-term. We want, the Verasol standard says these systems need to have warranties for 2 years or 3 years. We're now migrating our systems to a 5 years warranty. In the market, they actually last way more than 5 years, right? So we build products that actually work, and the 20 years of doing this has shown that this works. We are able to minimize our production cost, even though the material cost is still small. The smaller you make it, the smaller the overall system cost is. And we do this through centralized manufacturing and very efficient manufacturing. And then we've made pay-as-you-go work, like I said, and this has been really critical to expanding our customer base. So people who would never be able to, it's no longer just the middle class who can pay 5,000-10,000 rands or much higher for the bigger systems that can afford our products. Anybody that can, put down 500 rands can get to walk home with a solar system. So that massively expands that ability. And then I'd say, really important is smart government incentives, which I won't talk about anymore because all of my other colleagues have talked about it. But I'll say that Sunking will not be where it is without that partnership with government, where governments through subsidies have been able to reduce the cost of the system, either through subsidies or, tax incentives. And by doing so, make even more people afford it, right? So all of these, also then the other point I should make is that because through our pay-as-you-go system, we make it work in such a way that default rates are low, because people wonder, how do you ensure that people actually pay for these things over 5 years or over 2 years or 9 months? One is, we use technology to sort of like assess customers. We use a lot of AI and machine learning, but at scale. And then we also have a lockout system. I say I have very little time left. We have a lockout system that actually makes sure that customers who don't pay, the system just stops working. So it works like a prepaid meter. So that's just some of the ways I would say that we need to learn in South Africa. Now, what are the benefits of this particular private sector type model? Noting that, as Dr. Karen said, there are other models out there, the microgrids, mini grids that you could use. But pay-as-you-go standalone solar is fast. You can deliver rapidly, as we've shown and still showing. The cost of the public finance that it takes to actually make it work is a fraction of what normally happens through your normal tender and supply. If it's, the government is paying 10 or 20,000 rands to tender and supply, they would probably need, a third of that to be able to just create a subsidy instead and allow that money reach more people. And I'll just leave this for a later discussion so that because I'm noting the time. But I would also say that it's the private sector incentive here where the government doesn't, the service lasts because revenue depends on it. You're basically putting the incentive to make the system work on the private sector under this pay-as-you-go model. So it's great that South Africa is looking to open to this. We think it's welcome and very long overdue. As some people say, whenever you wake up is your morning, South Africa is maybe 5 years a bit late to this, but it is our morning. Let's roll with it. And the good thing is South Africa has all the elements to make this roll much faster than any other country that I can imagine. But it's important, CEO, please, to land on this final lesson that we won't achieve what this promise, and the private sector won't be able to drive for this kind of success that I've just painted without some learning from what the rest of the world has done. There's a strong temptation to do things the way we're familiar with, to default to that. But the truth is there's a lot of learnings out there that shows that some of those familiar things actually don't work. And I would say first of all is pay on verified results. The tender and supply model really doesn't work. Make private sector carry the risk of operations, carry the risk of financing upfront, and only pay for the results that they do. And the second point is get customers to get used to paying for their power. Again, Eskom is suffering this, the municipalities are suffering this because some customers haven't been paying for power. But even within this off-grid sector, it's very important that that customer pays principle applies. And then lastly, because this has come up in many of the discussions, is we would really encourage some flexibility in the system sizing rather than saying this is a minimum size through which everybody must apply. Because the truth is, for some households, they don't need 600 watts. So if you are making them pay for 600 watts, or if the government is paying for a 600 watt system for a household whose demand is actually 200 watts, you're basically wasting money and taking money away from another household that would have benefited from that. And so what we've seen that works elsewhere is to allow the customers to actually choose what meets their demand. Right. And then, of course, as their demand grows over time, the good thing with, again, this model that has worked across is people can move up the energy ladder. They can easily get upgrades to a bigger system and keep going. So with that said, I'll pause there. I'll just say that there are many wrong ways to do this work of bringing in the private sector. We really do. We're happy with how the DEE is seeking inputs, and we hope that they will choose the right path that has worked elsewhere.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Wale. That was an informative presentation. I liked your tagline there, that every time you wake up, that's your morning. So I'd like to say definitely this is our morning in South Africa. And as you heard from the previous speakers, government is ready to go. Private sector has been the missing puzzle in energy universal access conversation or engagements such as Mission 300 million or whatever it's called. Sarah, you'll correct me. But we're glad that we are slowly making sure that that piece of a puzzle that has been missing for a long time has been added. So thanks. I think you touched on quality projects, innovative financing models, but I don't want to take any more time because the questions are coming thick and fast in the chat box, and I've seen some of the hands coming up already, and I'd like to use the remaining time to allow the audience to ask their questions. Allow me to maybe read out the questions in the chat box. Please note them, and then we'll take 2 or 3 hands, and then we'll allow all the speakers to address those questions, and then we will then close off the session. Just to say before I start reading the question, that this is the beginning. So if you feel that your questions have not been adequately addressed, just know that there will be a working group meeting scheduled in the next month, and we will invite the speakers again, those who are able to attend, to take some of these questions. So with that said, I will read 2 questions, I think mostly directed at Dr. Wale. A compliment to all presenters, such brilliant presentations. I couldn't agree more. The question from Damien reads, a concern for growing backlog of unelectrified urban households. The action plan seems to be business as usual, that is, carry on with the grid tied, but that means ongoing waiting lists, sometimes for decades. These households need something while they wait. What could the interim solution be without drawing down the once-off INEP CAPEX funding? I think maybe that's for Dr. Karen and Tate Bongani. Matimba Maluleke is asking Dr. Wale whether the grid network, is there a grid network in areas that you service? Also, just double check that I'm reading them correctly. Think this is directed to speakers. Then I'll take the last 2 questions in the chat box. The one comes from Tenjiwe, and it reads, does INEP provide or appoint contractors for ongoing operations and maintenance after installations are completed? If so, how can qualified technicians or companies participate in these O&M opportunities? I like that, Tenjiwe. I think Dr. Wale highlighted that this systems needs to be maintained. Any system needs to be maintained. So this whole notion that you can install and leave is not helpful. And that's why we ended up with 40% of the systems not working. The last one is to Dr. Wale. Dr. Wale, also, how do you ensure that customers pay and not default since they would not qualify for traditional credit facilities? Can I suggest that we start with Dr. Karen and Mr. Bongani? If you noted those questions, can you please attend to those? Then Dr. Wale, then I'll take a round of questions from the audience. I think I recognize 2 hands. Dr. Karen and Tate Bongani, if you are in the call, can you please help address questions related to INEP?
Thank you. I'm not sure if Mr. Bongani is still with us, but I'll take the first stab if you like. So the question that I'm seeing here is around the backlog, and what it's saying is, is there an interim solution without touching the once-off INEP funding, which comes in from Treasury every year? So the 3 microgrid solutions that I presented, number 1 in there can be considered a bit of an interim solution because it doesn't really support a full need for a full family household. It really just gives lighting and some charging facilities as well as cooking and warm water. So that could be considered as an interim solution that one then builds upon. However, the funding for INEP, I think Mr. Ntlabati broke it down, and he knows a lot more about it than I do in terms of how it will be channeled through the DBSA and the different donor funders that will be involved. So I believe that some funding may be accessible through those channels without touching the roughly 4 billion that comes in from Treasury every year for the business as usual INEP model. Then just to touch on I'm not sure if the contractors was a question for me, but there is usually an
operation
O&M.
and maintenance.
Yes,
yes, Dr. Karen. Yes, please go ahead.
There's usually an O&M component to what's being put into place. Just from the perspective of, for example, if you're grid tied, obviously the grid and the transmission and the distribution components should be operated and maintained through essentially the tariffs that are imposed on that connection. So this is where affordability analysis comes in as well. So is it affordable to do that? When one looks at the off-grid solutions that are being offered, the financing models and sort of 15 minutes is not fast, or is not long enough to really go into the sort of 50-page INEP action plan that was produced, but we really looked at all the INEP plans for the provinces. We looked at who is building and where, so Eskom and the municipalities, what they are building. And all of that is supposed to be integrated into the operations and maintenance plan, along with the rollout of a microgrid component, which has been costed. And the governing factor in this becomes the affordability analysis. So if it is affordable to take the grid to a point and distribute it, and it will be able to be funded through operation and maintenance costs, then yes. If it's a microgrid, there is a plan, like a schematic of how that could possibly be funded moving forward. The nice thing about doing something like a PV with battery energy storage is that generally you have an upfront cost, and after that your O&M is fairly minimal. And that's why education and social engagement becomes so important, because the customers that are receiving or buying those microgrids or mini grids or so forth will need to understand how it works, what its capabilities are, and what its requirements are. And from there, they would be able to, with minimal cost, maintain their electricity supply. I'm not sure if there was anything else. I don't think the rest were for me. Yeah, I'm just scrolling through, but I'm not seeing any more.
No, I think that was it, Dr. Karen. Thank you very much, though, for those comprehensive responses. I see Sim's face is already showing. That's signaling that my time is almost over. Dr. Wale, thank you for answering the questions in the chat box. We have been reliably informed that some questions have gone into the Q&A portion and not just the chat. We will take those questions and make sure that they get responses from our esteemed panelists. I wish to then take a question. There were two hands that had been up for a while. Nolwazi, your hand was up at some point, and Tenjiwe or somebody else. Can you please make it brief, not more than 30 seconds?
Okay, thank you very much. My comment would be to the SANEDI team and the DEE is that we've had a very comprehensive off-grid policy in South Africa. And with the INEP, what I believe and that the off-grid and the on the grid is being mixed up and coming up with a very convoluted system, which will result in many people still not accessing energy. I do agree with Wale that the current off-grid policies are quite clear, and we need to we have a private sector incentive, which is the FBE, free basic electricity. Let's make that the drive in making sure that the rollouts happen. So I think it's not that there's no policies, it's just political will in enabling the space of the free basic electricity to happen at a faster pace. And I feel that the off-grid policies are just sufficient, and we need to separate matters of off-grid and on-grid, and off-grid is sorted. We just need to implement and roll out. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nolozi. I think that was more a comment than a question. Dr. Karen, I hope you will join our working group and engage. And Nolozi, the same extends to you. I hope we can have this engagement where we have a lot more time to unpack what that actually means in practice. Sarah, any thoughts from your end before I hand over to Sim?
I just want to thank our South African colleagues for this advancement, and just underscore the point that household access matters, and access to all the points that were discussed is more about lighting, it's more about energy, it's really about empowerment and economic transformation. So let's look at off-grid solar as part of the energy infrastructure and part of the economic empowerment that South Africa is aiming for, and put this plan together so that it reaches across multiple ministries and has that application. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah. So it's not a separate infrastructure. It is very much part of our own electrical energy infrastructure, and it needs to be viewed as such. And I do hope that we can drive that message home as this community. Dr. Karen, anything that you wanted to share that you haven't had the opportunity to? You're good. Dr. Wale, you're good? Fantastic. Mr. Bongani, are you still on the call? Maybe if he's not, I would like to take this opportunity to thank our speakers, our panel of esteemed speakers, for their insightful, educative presentation, but also for their passion for this space. It's palpable, and we look forward to tapping into your various energies, pun intended, to build this space in South Africa. And with that, I'd like to then hand over to Sim to close off with a bit of admin work. Sim, I don't want to dictate, but you probably have 3 minutes because we're already running over time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tabi. Thank you, colleagues. And maybe colleagues, if you can allow me to have, instead of 3 minutes, 7 minutes, I know we have run out of over time. And what I will want to do maybe is to introduce our interim working group's chairperson, Dr. Wale. If you can just come in just in 2 minutes, give us the mandate and the roadmap of the working group. And then after you, maybe Zimkita, if you can just come in on the next steps and maybe share the way forward, including the next dates and the next event that we'll be having. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Sim. And again, thanks, colleagues, for this. First of all, I appreciate you offering me this position of the interim chairperson as we set up this working group. As you guys would have heard, this is an important topic to me. And look forward to working with everyone here who would like to join that working group as we engage with all the other critical stakeholders to make sure that, that's 2030 date, we achieve the universal electrification in South Africa. I think the mandate of the working group is pretty clear, and it has come out from a lot of the discussions that we've already had today. There's clearly, a need for the private sector to partner with government to be able to achieve the universal electrification in South Africa. There's a need. The government has already made this decision and is already looking at very interesting hybrid business models for filling this gap. And the working group should just be positioned. The mandate should be that we are the thought partners on behalf of the solar industry, specifically to the extent that this gap is filled by solar. We know that there are other grid-based technologies that the department is looking at, but for solar specifically, the working group can then engage with the government across many different work streams. And some of them that's come to mind just from our discussions here is, on product quality, has been something that's been of concern, that's been mentioned, of the right type, and that includes the longevity issue, of the right type of procurement that, allows for again, longevity and the blending of public and private finance in a way that, the private sector can take more risk and the government can free up capital to reach more people. And then a policy and regulatory environment is also something that's been mentioned. I know Nwazia said that it's, the rules are clear, but rules are always evolving. And so there will be need for engagement between ourselves and the government on those rules whenever there is a need, right? So I'll say that those are some of the work streams that come to mind. But I think as together with the Secretariat, we'll be working to outline all of this based on the outcomes from this call, and hopefully, share that with everyone as we start to have these quarterly meetings that the CEO had mentioned earlier. So without taking too much time, let me just again appreciate everyone. I'm really excited to be part of this journey. I hope many of you are, because I really think we have a good chance to do something impressive here. And it's my privilege to be part of that. Thank you all. And over to you, Sim, to take us through the next steps.
Thank you, Dr. Wale. And Zimkita, if you can just please come in, ma'am. You've got 2 minutes.
Thank you, Sim. I'll try and be very quick. So thank you very much again to our speakers, and thank to our guests for joining us today. So our next step is, one, you can join the working group since today is the launch, so you can join the working group. I've put a link in the chat box that you can use to complete, to indicate which of the working groups you want to participate in. Working groups are for SAPVIA members. If you're not sure if you are a member or not, still complete the form. We will inform you, and we will share the meeting invite for our first working group meeting for universal access. I also want to sort of just flag that we would then continue this conversation or take it to solar and storage in Cape Town. We'll have it in person. We do have a dedicated panel focused on universal access that's going to be on day 2. So this is an invitation to sign up and do come and join us at solar and storage as we continue this conversation with our esteemed panelists. Sim, I think I'll stop there. I'm not sure how I'm doing with time. I tried to be as quickly as possible.
No, thank you. You were quickly. No, thanks a lot, Zimkita. And thank you once again, our guest and our panelist. It was very, very, very encouraging. It was very, very thought-provoking. And it's very, very good that together we are working towards ending energy poverty in the country. And I think with those words, thank you once again. We will see you in our next working group meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sim. And we will answer the questions. I think we'll make sure that the audience does get responses to questions, and we'll share the presentations. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sia?
Hi, sorry. Good afternoon. I'm Siasanga from CSIR. Can we perhaps maybe have the presentations as well shared with us?
Correct.
Sure, there will be.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate
Thank you.
it. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.